Hey, this is Cedric Youngelman, your host of the Bitcoin Matrix podcast. Thank you so much for checking out my show, where we have philosophical conversations about Bitcoin and the future of money. Please make sure that you're subscribed to the show. And if you're watching this on YouTube, like the video so that more people see it, and hit that notifications button so that you don't miss out on any new content. This episode with Aleks Svetski on FIRE, Bitcoin, and teleportation is brought to you by River Financial. I'm able to produce this show in part thanks to my sponsors, and I'm very selective about who I work with and put in front of you, so I hope that you will check them out and support them. Now, securely buy Bitcoin and purchase hosted mining rigs at river.com. I've been using River for over 2 years because they have incredible customer service, zero fees on recurring orders, and they will help you unlock the possibilities of this revolutionary digital asset. To get started and find out for yourself, use the link in the show notes and get up to $10,000 free when you buy Bitcoin and miners at river.com. Then get your sats off your exchange, any exchange, including river.com. My favorite hardware wallet is the COLDCARD from Coinkite. It's definitely worth learning how to use it. You can also start by transferring your coins to a simple OPENDIME you can keep safe. You can get a 5% discount by using the referral link in the show notes. If you're challenging the traditional status quo, then why are you still paying expensive insurance premiums? Experience the freedom and affordability of cash payments and community-funded healthcare with CrowdHealth. Use promo code MATRIX during sign-up for a special discounted offer. Check out the link in the show notes for more information. And now, let's enter the Bitcoin Matrix with Aleks Svetski, where we discuss a new timeline, before Bitcoin and after Bitcoin.
What is real? How do you define real?
You can't jump into cash. Cash is trash. What do? You get out.
Aleks Svetski is a speaker, author, and founder of the world's first Bitcoin accumulation app, Amber. Host of the Wake Up podcast and creator of the Bitcoin Times publication, and author of FIRE, Bitcoin, Teleportation, A New Timeline Before Bitcoin, After Bitcoin, amongst many other seminal pieces. Aleks Svetski, welcome back to the Bitcoin Matrix podcast for the fourth time. How are you, brother?
Cedric, thank you, bro. We're gonna be the fourth time. It's we should do one weekly instead.
Yeah, man. You're always excited to talk to. You know, we're here to talk about FIRE, Bitcoin, teleportation, but it was kind of tough. We haven't chatted in a little bit, and you put out a lot of great work. We haven't talked really since the On Communist Manifesto. You've had a lot of solo pieces out, and I was getting back into the remnant. I kind of wanted to cover it. I think it would be really pertinent right now. But when we were in Austin, you gave me the Bitcoin Times number 4, A New Hope. And I was thinking back on that, and I know the 5th edition's coming out, so I want to touch on that a lot. But I really wanted to sit outside by the pool and hold this and read something of yours. So I got into FIRE, Bitcoin, and FIRE, Bitcoin, teleportation. And I was just blown away by this piece. Lots of big thinking. Right now, it's probably your favorite piece for me. Your favorite piece of. I'm kind of lost in words today.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
So I'd love to dig into this. What inspired you to write this piece?
Yeah, man. That's I think to date, it's it probably still is my favorite piece that I've ever written. It was the one that I had to draw upon, a whole lot of inspiration and thinking about what Bitcoin actually means in a broader sense. It's a real kind of like a big picture essay about what the fuck does Bitcoin mean on a civilizational timeline, not just when are we going to hit $1 million or when are we going to get the fucking next ETF? Like, who gives a shit about that? What's the real big picture here? And yeah, man, I think a couple things inspired it. Number one was I guess during Miami, it was actually 2021. So the prior year in Miami. You get around Bitcoiners, you start talking, and you kind of like start big braining each other, basically, right? And throwing a lot of ideas around. And kind of Francis said something offhand, is like, Bitcoin's going to be the biggest thing since fucking fire, right? And it's like, who knows when the next big thing after it's going to be? It's probably fucking teleportation. He sort of said it offhand, and I kind of ran with it. I was like, fuck, you know what? There's something there, and that's kind of what I like to do. I mean, even the remnant idea actually came from Francis, and I just kind of brought life to it. And Francis is really good at like kind of coming up with those little sound bites. He's fucking awesome with that. And yeah, that's sort of what I did with this piece. And it was funny. The first time I actually used the phrase was the next day at the conference itself. There was I think it was, what was it called that time? I think it was like the Toxic Bitcoin Maximalist panel or something like that. And it was like me, Nico, there was two other guys on there. I'm gonna forget. Dr. Bitcoin and Young Lurk, I think it was, and Nick Cuntmine was hosting. And yeah, we had this great conversation on there. I said, Bitcoin will be the most important thing since fire. It'll be fire, Bitcoin, teleportation when we look back on civilization. So I kind of left it there, and I'd always meant to write something about it. And it wasn't until the end of 2021, and I still remember where I was actually. I was the first elements of the article started coming together for me while I spent a couple of days in Colorado with my woman, and I was listening to a book called Energy and Civilization by Vaclav Smil. And that sort of like ignited this idea in my head of like how inextricably linked to the concept of energy civilization actually is. And I mean, a lot of people, and even the hippies will tell you this, like, what if you ask them what's money, and they're like, money's like energy, bro. But as stupid as they sound, they're actually right, because essentially that's what it is. And Vaclav Smil in his book says, the universal currency is energy. So that planted a bunch of seeds. And when I actually sat down to write it, I actually wrote it pretty quickly. I was in, after Colorado, we popped over to Dominican Republic, or maybe I've got my wires crossed. Maybe we're actually in Dominican Republic before Colorado. Who knows? Whatever. Like at some point there in between those, it was November of 2021. I sat down, I just like smashed this out, and basically I had a few points of like, what was civilization to date? What has it been? Could we view civilization through the lens of the constant discovery of better money? And that's sort of what I laid out there. And if we can make that argument, then how big is the discovery of perfect money in the grand scheme of things? And that's kind of the argument that I try to make. So it is pretty big. It's pretty ambitious, but I don't know. Maybe there's something there.
There's a lot there. Primarily, I want to dig into energy, civilization, and fire. But maybe we can touch on energy now. What kind of energy usage are we using now to do things like transact with money? What does it take to buy a cup of coffee at the corner store?
Yeah, thank you for giving me a low ball there to fucking smack. But this is a big one, man. Like when people talk about Bitcoin's energy usage, they sort of take for granted the amount of energy and time that gets used up to just, as you said, buy a coffee at the local corner store. Like for you and I to be able to do that, like the the point of sale terminals need to exist. The Visa and MasterCard rails need to exist. Between the Visa and MasterCard rails, you've got a whole set of, you've got like bin providers, you've got clearance, you've got all this sort of crap that happens between. So you have all these companies that sit in between that. Then you have like the fucking banking layer. And then the banking layer needs to be then connected somehow to the Wall Street and up all the way through to the central banking layer. And then that needs to be wrapped in like a judicial system, and government and the state. And then that needs to be sort of substantiated through a monopoly on violence. So like the military industrial complex. So all of that shit needs to effectively exist in order for us to have some level of stability you know, like a level of stability great enough for us to be able to perform commercial transactions, to perform commerce. And that's effectively what's required. And that's a fucking huge energy use. Like, you know, I can't think of really anything more energy intensive than the kind of stuff that we've cobbled together in order to make transaction and commerce trustworthy enough for a complex civilization to, come out of. Like, it's intensive, and Bitcoin does away with, I'd say, maybe 99% of that shit. So it's probably 2 orders of magnitude more efficient, maybe even 3 orders of magnitude more efficient, and it's probably multiple orders of magnitude better and superior in what it delivers out the other end. So if you kind of think about it, it's not a 10x improvement. It's like I don't know, what is 4 or 5 orders of magnitude? It's like a 100,000x improvement. It's ridiculous how much better that is. And yeah, to tie it back to the article, if we can agree that money is central to the establishment and prosperity of a civilization, that kind of a 1,000, 10,000, 100,000x improvement should be like monumental in the impact it'll have on a civilization.
Yeah, what I can't get over with there, and what I struggle with, is what you're getting at with the amount of cooperation and trust that we're achieving here, so that I could go into a store and buy something and not worry about someone beating me over the head with a bat and taking my money and value before I get my coffee. Also, that we can have that civility, and so I could feel like the most liberal hippie in the world. There's blood and disorder or chaos in some other boundary that I'm not living at. And I relate it very quickly maybe to like blood diamonds. You want to propose to your future wife and you want to have this beautiful moment, but someone might have had to do something really bad, or someone might have suffered violence for you to get that moment and have that value in your hands. But all for the sake of feeling like we have or having this trust, or this feeling of trust, but having to rely on all these institutions. But let's go back quite a bit to fire. I like the way you framed it up, and it's like, have you ever sat at a campfire and just stared at the fire? And that's one of my favorite things to do, but I never really thought a little bit more deeply about it. Like, what is fire? What has fire done for humanity? So yeah, what is fire?
Dude, it's a deep question. Like, there's the science question to that, is like, it's a chemical reaction, blah 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 blah, right? But like, it's kind of, fire is like this visual dance of energy, right? It's it's matter transforming into something else, and we actually can see it. And I guess more importantly then is like, what has it done for us? And there's I mean, depending on where you sit, like, I wrote this article kind of like from a secular viewpoint, and it might rub people who are more religious sort of the wrong way. But I still, while I would consider myself in temperament and outlook and behavior quite Christian, I still ascribe to the idea that we've sort of evolved and consciousness has evolved. And if my sort of understanding of God is not that the entity that is God is anthropomorphic. I think it's sort of this force that kind of kindled the universe, and we're an echo of that, at least in my mind. At least sort of that's where I'm at. That viewpoint might evolve. It may not. We'll sort of see. But the argument that I make is that there seems to be evidence that what sort of makes us different to other species on the planet is that at some point, this godly force of life experimented with bipedalism. So kind of we stood up, and what happened was it was like walking bipedalism, while it was less stable, it was also extremely energy efficient in comparison to being a quadruped. And in doing so, it unlocked and released energy which the brain began to use and consume. And in doing so, we started to think more and started to evolve. And then sort of the after bipedalism, the big thing that sort of starts to happen is hands. And I don't think people realize how important hands are. Hands and the brain so fundamentally linked. In fact, one could argue that it's our hands that make us more human than anything else, because like our hands have allowed our brain to sort of grow and develop in particular ways. So anyway, at some point along the evolutionary timeline, we discover how to reproduce fire, and then that kind of takes these two experiments, sort of the bipedalism and the hand. It kind of solidifies them. It's a fork in the road that we take, like the discovery of fire, and it sends us down that path, and that's it. Like maybe if we couldn't figure out fire, if we didn't discover fire, maybe we wouldn't be here in the way we are. Maybe the whole bipedal experiment and the hand and everything would have failed because we weren't robust enough, strong enough, or any of that sort of shit. But whatever happened along the way, it seems that fire had a fundamental impact. And in doing that, then the argument and the evidence suggests as much, is that we were able to start cooking food, and then that unlocked greater amounts of energy. It allowed us to sort of have a smaller intestinal tract. With a smaller intestinal tract, we used less digestive energy to, absorb food and get the nutrients, etc., out. So you've got one more nutrient density in the food, and you've got more energy efficiency in extracting the nutrients from the food. And as a result, all of that excess energy, or a large majority of that excess energy, went to the brain again. And that kind of creates this positive feedback loop, this sort of, this self-reinforcing spiral upwards of a bigger brain. And my whole argument is somewhere along the line is that, some sort of high level cognition and therefore consciousness kind of comes from that. And yeah, I think the discovery or the advent of fire made us the kind of humans that we are today. Fundamentally, it's a big sort of fork in the road.
Around this fork, so where did we go? Where were we on the food chain around this time?
I mean, who knows? Like that's a tough question. I think obviously much lower on the food chain. I think with fire, we were able to sort of climb further up. So maybe we were somewhere where the apes are today, for example. And once again, I think some people might take offense to that. They're like, oh, we're not fucking apes, we're divine creatures or whatever. But maybe there was some similarities there. Who knows? I don't know. Like none of us are gonna fucking go back and validate this one way or the other. But once again, it seems there is some relationship between us and the fucking monkeys and the apes. And if there is some level of truth to that sort of stuff, then maybe we were in a similar spot on the food chain to them.
Right. There's an interesting quote in the piece: "You don't change fire, fire changes you." Are humans aligned with their environment?
I think the wiser humans try to align themselves with their environment. They'll try and change the environment and change the things they can. But I think once again, it's a question of energy expenditure, right? The more you align yourself with the environment, the more energy efficient you are generally. Now, that doesn't mean that you become so energy efficient that you just fucking live outside, right? And not have anything. So we are fundamentally creative by nature. So, we can adapt and change our environment. And we've been extraordinarily successful at doing that, particularly in the last couple 100 years. But, you can definitely, it can sort of go both ways. And it's a tricky line. Like, I'm nobody to sort of tell people where that line is versus, where you should align with the environment versus where you should change it. Like, it's different for different people for different reasons in different locations, etc. But it does take a level of wisdom to not sort of overdo that, where you either fuck up the environment or you make yourself so weak that you can no longer adapt to environments. So, like, we've in many ways, like, you look at America, for example, we've adapted the environment so much that people are, they have no more fucking testosterone, they're all fucking feminized, like, they're at home watching Netflix and everything like this. So they've dominated their environment so much that they've become a slave to their environment, right? But you sort of also have the flip side where I'm in Eastern Europe at the moment in Macedonia, and these fucking morons over here, the country is so fucking poor and bankrupt and broken that they get paid by the EU to burn trash here, because the EU doesn't want to burn it in their own sort of environment. So these idiots burn the trash, and you can fucking smell it, bro. Like, this place, which is so mountainous, should have the clearest air in the world, smells like fucking burnt trash. The whole place. It's a fucking disgrace. So that's sort of like an example on both sides that is stupidity, and then there's things somewhere in the middle, which is, I would argue that Dubai is an incredible project that took pretty shitty environment and turned it into something quite livable, right? So, we can do both. The question is, like, how are we wise enough to do it in an intelligent manner or not?
Yeah. Thinking about environment and alignment, what do you glean from, like, lions and how majestic they are?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. I can't remember if I read this somewhere, if I heard it or something like that, but it was basically someone said that lions have been at the top of the food chain for, tens of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of years, some variant on the lion, and they've had enough time to kind of not go and tear through and eat all the fucking animals around them, such that they have nothing else to eat. So sort of lions have had time to develop and not be tyrannical, whereas human beings have gone from the middle of the food chain to the top of the food chain very, very quickly in a short period of time. So we haven't learned to I guess adapt to the environment in the same way sort of the lions have. So you have this sort of majestic nature of a lion versus almost like a peasant nature of the human, who has the power to really, like, he can fucking eat everything around him. But instead of showing restraint, like showing majesty and nobility, the human just goes and fucking eats and burns everything around him down, right? And that's a, when you think about what majesty is a level of maturity that is earned over the years, and it's almost bred. And I think we've lost a lot of that breeding. And maybe, this is sort of like a, you could argue that this is a function of the fact that technologically speaking, we've evolved so quickly that we haven't evolved our morals alongside it. So, maybe when we were less technologically adept, we were actually more majestic in our behavior. So if you look at how the ancients behaved, and recently I've been doing a whole lot of reading on like ancient history, and man, like when you think about people like Alexander the Great, at the age of 21, on foot and on fucking horse, went from, one end of Europe through all the way to fucking India, through winters, through summers, through deserts, through fucking oceans and rivers and mountains and you name it, through constant war and battle and but so not only the gumption and the kind of character that required to do that, but the way they also behaved, and kind of the honor and the courage, and how they treated each other as well as warriors. Like, Alexander many times would say, like, when he went into sort of fight Darius, and one of Darius's right hand men came in to sort of protect Darius, and Alexander and him fought, like the courage at which they came at each other. They didn't, like, for example, they didn't stab each other's horses because they knew that would be below them. Even though they could have like easily won the battle, either one, like if they stabbed the horse first, the other would fall. They didn't do that. They fought at each other because that's what the honor demanded. And there's a quote from Alexander saying, "I love this man from that moment." And it was his fucking enemy. They were trying to kill each other. Like that kind of honor and courage and prestige and majesty was present in the ancient times, because maybe we didn't have the technological prowess to really trample over everything around us. So I'm really, I think about this a lot these days, is like, we have evolved materially, but I think we've actually devolved intellectually, morally, emotionally, and spiritually in many ways. So anyway, that kind of how that relates to a lion is that maybe we did have a time when we were more like lions, and technology sort of outpaced us to the point where maybe we've enslaved ourselves to technology inadvertently, and something's gone wrong. So anyway, not exactly an answer, but hope that's food for thought.
Yeah. It seems like with this piece that humanity is driving towards something, whether it achieves it or not. And the first thing, I think the achievement is just sort of fire and mastering fire and harnessing energy there. What is your take on linear thinking and where it's leading us?
Mm-hmm. So I think linear thinking is kind of like has its place. It's important because you kind of need to know that if you're going to walk a mile, and you can kind of see where you're going, you sort of know where you're going. And you also need to sort of think linearly, because like if you take the pan and put it on the pot and turn it on, like it's going to heat up the fucking pot, and you're going to cook some food. So it has its place. I think where it can get sort of unstuck is the application of that sort of thinking toward complex systems, basically. And this is a there's a whole rabbit hole in complexity thinking, but complex systems are these non-linear systems where there's things happening all over the place, and each of the things that happen are in some way interrelated, right? So it's not just that I press here, and then the thing that's next to it is going to be affected, and I can measure that linearly. Like if I press here, 5 other things over here are affected, and it actually could be even 10 things. I don't even know if it's 5. And I don't know the ratio at which, that effect happens. And then if I discover one of them and I try and adjust that, then another 10 things sort of happen. And this is basically what happens, in an economy. Like an economy is a complex system where if you start messing with the inputs and the outputs, particularly, or if you start messing with the fundamental structure of it, like the money, you have no fucking idea what happens downstream of that. Like it's way too complex to first even fathom, then to measure, let alone to actually do something about, to manage. So yeah, I guess the tricky thing there is like a lot of people, because linear thinking serves us well in a day-to-day life. We take that linear thinking and we try to apply it to these macro things, and we're fucking lost. We have no idea. And then we create 100 problems for every one problem we think we solved. And then we wonder why things are getting worse. We have no idea. So that's sort of what I'd say about linear thinking.
Yeah, I was watching this clip from Rogan discussing Bitcoin today, and Beautyon commented on it. He said this is typical of a lot of conversations out there, and I don't know anything about this, but it's good for you. I don't know anything about this, but it's bad for you. And, it's one thing to use a microwave and not know how to use it, or drive a car and not be a mechanic, but no one seems to know about how anything works and yet has an opinion on everything. And I think that comes from sort of experts and that linear thinking of, I've heard this is bad, therefore it is. It's kind of bleak. And I'm thinking, what is an apex discovery?
Okay. I mean, to sort of riff off what you just said about that last piece, I think we are living in the age of experts, and we've never been dumber than any other time in history, honestly. Like, we as I said before, like, we're materially superior, but intellectually, morally, spiritually, physically, mentally, like all of the other faculties, I think we are inferior, far more than what we've ever been in history. And if in that sense, like, you could argue that we were actually living in a fucking dark ages now, and we don't even know it because everything is so warm and cushy and nice. But anyway, to go to your question, what is an apex discovery? I kind of call Bitcoin an apex discovery, but I just sort of think of an apex discovery as something that is it's kind of like a peak in terms of discoveries. So, like, we make small discoveries along the way all the time with different things, but then there's these sort of apex discoveries which are really not only fundamental, but, like, we discovered electricity. Like, that is fucking incredible. We're not going to discover electricity 2.0. Like, it's electricity. That is the discovery. Now we can do different things with it, or all that sort of stuff, but the apex discovery itself was electricity. I mean, electricity is probably one of the biggest ones. Like, oil's up there as well, and steel and stuff like that. But, like, really, electricity is really up there. And in that case, like, in that sense, I'd say that Bitcoin is up there with electricity. I think it's superior to oil, superior to, probably superior to writing as well, in many ways, because, like, the language of value transcends verbal language. So yeah, I think it's up there with electricity. It's fundamentally something special.
Right. What is your definition of evil?
I think at the time, you might have to remind me what I said in the article. Actually, do you want to remind me what I said in the article? I think I said something to do with, while you look for that, I think it was something to do with, like, willful ignorance, blended with arrogance, and, kind of, yeah, so something along those lines. Did I have a different definition in the piece?
I gleaned it from your chat with Marty on Tales from the Crypt. So I'm not sure I got it from, but you had a very interesting take along the lines of what you just shared there. And to build on that, then, if Bitcoin is an apex discovery and we go through this transition, I guess there's two things here. One is there's a transition period, and then there's after Bitcoin, which I think of as after the transition period. So I'd like to talk maybe more about after Bitcoin first. How does Bitcoin bake morality into, sort of human thinking or action?
Yeah, this is so this is where, as I said recently, I've become a little bit more black-pilled, in the sense of, like, just seeing the contrast between modern man and ancient man, particularly. Like, it's very disillusioning to see how we've, like, taken one step forward in material realm and 10 steps back in every other realm. And that's, like, it's a disillusioning thing when you realize that. Now, when I wrote this, I wasn't as jaded, I think, as I am now. And I was very, very, very optimistic about the impact Bitcoin would have on people, because I've seen in myself and in other Bitcoiners that I admire and respect, like, Bitcoin seems to have made them better people. Now, mind you, this isn't for everyone. Like I've seen that there's there's a lot of fucking dickheads still in and around Bitcoin. Whether it's sellouts, whether it's just fucking turds who want to spend all day, like trolling and complaining and whinging and whining and all that sort of stuff. Like there's dickheads everywhere, and I think we'll probably never get rid of that. But I guess they are counterfactuals to the idea that Bitcoin, makes people more moral. So I kind of question this one a little bit. Maybe I'm starting to believe that Bitcoin seems to attract people who have a particular type of predisposition already, and then it helps them compound that. I think there are some people who are just fundamentally fuckwits, and no amount of Bitcoin, no amount of anything will fix that. But who knows? Maybe on a longer time scale, they maybe get washed out, or they adapt because they need to. Because I think what's unique about Bitcoin is that it's because it's inherently that how can I put this? There's no rewind button with Bitcoin. So like once you make a mistake, your Bitcoin's gone. So it's a very humbling thing. Unlike fiat money or any of that sort of stuff where there's either a rewind button, things can get socialized, things can get redistributed, etc. Like it creates an environment for that kind of crap, number one, to happen, but also it allows for more of a parasitic class to kind of grow, and that kind of skews all of the incentives in the wrong direction. So there's a whole slew of things that happen downstream in a world in which shit like Bitcoin doesn't, something like Bitcoin doesn't exist. So my guess is that in a world where people, like where responsibility starts to become more important, where individual agency becomes more important, where real loss and consequence is localized again, I think what happens over time, and this is maybe comes back to what I said about lions, is that you end up almost baking like better behavior in, like time preference changes, and time preference is very linked to morality. Like in Bitcoin Times Edition 5, Saifedean writes a piece called "Making Time Preference Low Again," and this is a really interesting like concept, and a lot of us have seen this. We talk about it. Is that you lower your time preference, that means you behave differently. You start thinking more long term. You take care of things more. You behave with a little bit more thinking. You're more civilizational. Like all that sort of stuff seems to be behavior that is in line with morality. So therefore, if Bitcoin helps lower time preference on a macro scale, by fixing it on a micro scale, perhaps we start to bake a little bit of morality into civilization again.
Yeah, order. I think you could blend order into that. I think you've touched on that, and I think order pairs very nicely with morality. So then, thinking back about if we don't need all of this institutional apparatus to just enable us to cooperate with each other, and let's say Bitcoin bakes that in, and then Bitcoin, we learn and master even more about energy through the usage of Bitcoin and the reduction of these other systems that are just wasting energy. And humanity is kind of going in that direction. What are things that we could kind of drive towards then? And I think one way if people have framed it up is using Nikolai Kardashev's scale. So maybe you could kind of explain his research and then your take on it, because I know you kind of
the Nakamoto scale. I mean he was like a physicist, I think, and a mathematician in the Soviet Union, like a few decades back, maybe a little longer, and basically he looked at I mean it's nothing but a hypothesis. Basically is that he kind of created a 3-part scale to how civilizations use energy, and one of the I think a type 0, type 1, and type 2, or it could be type 0, 1, 2, and 3, whatever. But they harness different scales of energy for civilization to operate. And the argument is that we're like somewhere between a type 0 and a type 1. So type 0 is like using local energy. A type 1 is using harnessing basically a planetary sort of level
Type
of
2
energy.
is solar system, 3 is galaxy.
There we go. Okay. So we're sort of somewhere between type 0 and type 1. But I kind of thought about that and I was like, man, we like harnessing energy is one thing, but like, if you're squandering, like if you're harnessing, 10 units of energy and you squander fucking 9 of them, like, is that really an advanced civilization? I don't think so. I think that's a pretty ridiculous civilization. Like, and I think that's probably our biggest problem today, is that we waste the majority of the energy we produce. And I think, like, before anything else, like we need to fix that. And Bitcoin is probably the most important thing on the path to fixing the quantum of energy that we're squandering. But I just thought that when I looked at the Kardashev scale and sort of looked into it, just the numbers and the assumptions and everything, they just seem so like arbitrary. It's like, let's harness the energy of the solar system. I don't even know what the fuck that means. Like, so we've got to like before we can even discuss harnessing large quantums of energy, like we need to fix the pricing mechanism to be able to understand what sort of energy is worth harnessing and how to properly price energy so that we don't waste the fucking shit in the first place. Like that's just so fundamentally important. So we don't get to type 1 without Bitcoin. It's just, maybe we get there and like on a fiat standard by wasting everything else, but we fundamentally blow ourselves up. There is no reaching type 1 without Bitcoin. Like, and that, like, I tried to make that clear in this article. It's like, and this is why we should rename it the Nakamoto scale, is that's kind of like the predicate for getting there. And this is sort of what pisses me off about, like, the physics bros and all this sort of stuff. They talk about like how advanced we're getting technologically and all this sort of shit, but they're completely blind to the importance of money along that path. Like like if we don't treat energy as currency, like we're never going to get to harnessing greater quantums of energy. So anyway, that's sort of why I created like this sort of idea of a Nakamoto scale, which I think is far more important, because only then can we get to stage 1, and then from stage 1 we can actually potentially get to a stage 2. Like things fundamentally shift after that. Like we have no conception about what it would mean to harness fucking energy from the galaxy at the moment, because we're too stupid to even get the shit out of fossil fuels properly. We haven't even sorted out nuclear energy. We haven't sorted out any of this sort of stuff because we are economically fucking bankrupt and we don't know how to do any of that. So let's get the money fixed. Then we can get to the point where the Earth is harnessing shitloads of energy. Then we can think about all this other stuff. And I think in the article I kind of joked around about, like, the Michio Kakus and all the physics bros of the world. Like, these idiots are off fucking talking about type 4, type 5, type 6 galaxies, like as if any of that discussion fucking matters. Like, talking about wormholes and multi-dimensions. It's like, shut the fuck up, bro. Like, that shit doesn't matter until we sort out the money and get to the point where we're actually harnessing energy properly on this planet and not squandering all of it. And yeah, I don't know. I have a real problem with modern physicists who just basically living in their own sci-fi fantasy land in their head.
Yeah, not using or balancing in economics.
Totally.
You bring up this notion how modern sci-fi doesn't really look at the possibility of a type 1 civilization, and it's kind of surreal. I think it sounds utopian, and I don't say that in a pejorative way. It just sounds like, and I think about this delicately, because I don't think it's like one central government harnessing all this energy on behalf of humanity. It's humanity is utilizing and harnessing this energy through independent, voluntary action that just is aligned with the environment. So if we're not and it would be less wasteful in that sort of Bitcoin standard world, and that's a whole wormhole. But in that environment, I mean, it sounds amazing. It sounds like paradise. What we'd be able to do, how we'd be able to just yeah, and so I don't know what sci-fi would be like about that. But then what is the Fermi paradox and the great filter?
Yeah, so just really quickly on the sci-fi thing. I just think fundamentally all sci-fi is flawed because it kind of goes into these narratives about being intergalactic and all this sort of stuff, but it never addresses the problem of money, right?
Right.
So it's kind of like it just skips over everything, and
They're
somehow we
taking their
got
rocks
there.
to space.
Totally, yeah.
Right.
And to me, it's like, I honestly long for some sci-fi to be written, and who knows, maybe 10 years from now I'll fucking write something because I'll be so sick and tired of all the crap that's sort of floating around. But yeah, I think there has to be something written about the transition period, so the interregnum, as I mentioned in the piece, like, and that'll be a story of great struggle, and then a future piece of like, we have this money, we've harnessed extra energy, like what may the challenges of the future look like, while having a Bitcoin standard, but sort of trying to address greater problems. That's going to be super, super interesting. So, we'll sort of see, we'll see what happens there. But to your thing about Fermi paradox. So the best way to think about this is the Enrico Fermi, I think was his name. He was a physicist, and his whole argument was like, we're looking out in space, and there's so much stuff out there, so many planets, so many stars, so much stuff. Like the probability that we should see other life is super, super high. Like we should be seeing life all over the place. Why the fuck are we not? And his thing is like different people have tried to answer it, and one of my more like one of the answers that I like better is the great filter answer, and this one, like I even wrote a dedicated piece about Bitcoin and the great filter in the Moon series, I think, for Bitcoin magazine. But this is sort of one of my more favorite theories about Bitcoin, and is that sort of this guy called Robin Hanson, I think his name was. He sort of postulated that, look, the great filter is this essentially a process, like, for humanity to, or for a species, a sentient species, to be able to like reach out to other, sentient species in the galaxy, they'll need to go through a whole fucking host of steps. Like you need sort of, I mean, I don't have the steps in front of me, unfortunately, but it's kind of like.
You want me to read them?
Yeah, yeah.
A planet
Read
capable of harboring life must form in the habitable zone around a star, often
Goldilocks
referred
zone,
to as the Goldilocks zone. Life itself must emerge, perhaps as an extension of the randomness inherent in the quantum realm, proteins. Those life forms must be able to reproduce, RNA, then DNA in our case. Simple cells, prokaryotes, must evolve into more complex cells. Multicellular organisms must develop. A method of increasing genetic diversity, sexual reproduction in our case, must take hold. Complex organisms must evolve.
Before you continue, so
Yep.
it's at that 0.6 basically, that so that 0.6 is where you've got the what do you call it? Robin Hanson's thing kind of stops there, and then he says basically, so after sex, like you get humans, and then you get technological humans, and then you get a spacefaring species can harness energy and go to the sun, right? Like, and they can communicate with everyone. So, and when I look at that, I was like, man, there's a bunch of shit missing here. Like, there's a whole series of steps that need to happen, if this great filter thing is actually seriously being a great filter thing. And this is again where physicists miss the economics. And I kind of throw in there, and I've pulled it up this time. So it's like complex organisms must evolve into species capable of repeatedly transforming potential energy into kinetic energy. So in other words, like this species that has sex needs to be able to create tools, like tools are important. So then the complex tool-wielding species must discover fire. So that comes back to our whole discussion here about these things. Like, so fire is super important. Like, if you're going to have a planet, in the Goldilocks zone, the inhabitants of the planet need to figure out fucking fire, because that is actually what shrinks the intestine and allows them to channel, send more energy into the brain. So that's important. So then the increased brain size, and this is sort of my whole point about consciousness that I mentioned earlier, is like from that increased brain size, the interconnectedness of the neurons, you get this sort of emergent consciousness come out from that. So that, I think, is a fundamental important step. And then step 10, and this is the money piece, is that conscious, intelligent species needs to develop a tool for measuring time, energy, and scarce resource, and that's effectively money. And then that species that figured out money uses it to develop complex societies. And this is the stuff that physicists, I think, they just don't fucking understand, is that you don't build complexity without money. Money is the tool that enables complexity in any civilization. So then I kind of say that, like, this thing culminates into technology that is required for space travel, but we ain't going to get proper space travel because point number 12 is that the species must discover and transition onto an energy money standard before it destroys itself. And for me, that's like the most important point. And that's where like the real piece of the great filter sort of sits. And that's where we are at the moment, is that, and maybe this ties really well into what I was saying before, again, about like, we are materially superior, but we are morally, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, and physically inferior, is that we've gotten to the point where we actually can fucking wipe ourselves out of stupidity, out of neglect, out of arrogance, out of immorality, out of all of these reasons. We really can. And add to that the fact that an asteroid might come out of somewhere and just fucking wipe us, or, volcano blows up and fucking, blankets the sky, whatever. There's a number of risks here. And, that's kind of the point where we are now. So we need to kind of transition on to an energy money standard so that we can actually price all of the risks properly, so that we can avoid the cataclysmic events that could occur from a species that is technologically powerful enough to blow itself up, which is where we are now. And then hopefully take that excess energy and direct it towards figuring out ways to, I don't know, build an intergalactic baseball bat, so if an asteroid does come, we can fucking hit the thing out of the sky, right? Or whatever else is required, such that we don't get wiped out by some sort of freak accident. So, either way, for us to do anything of that scale, we need huge levels of, economic cooperation, right? And economic prosperity. And we don't get that without going on to an energy money standard. So for me, like, these 6 points that I slotted into the original Great Filter sort of checklist, they're just missing. And I was like, well, fuck me. Like, how do you miss all of these pieces and think that we somehow go from, a species capable of genetic reproduction to a spacefaring species? Let's just skip all the parts about fucking civilization in between. It's like, no, you don't get to do that. So this is, I think that's just a very, very, very important takeaway for people, is that you need that process. And this is where I believe, like, we're at the pointy, tricky end of the Great Filter. And I don't know, do we fucking make it? Do we not? It's a very interesting point in time in the history or the evolution of any species.
Yeah, it seems like the risks have never been greater, from the random asteroid, nuclear annihilation, touched on a little bit around sterility, but dystopian gulags, sort of the children of men scenarios. One we didn't get into too much, though, is AI. What is your take on the risk of AI?
Well, this is, again, one of these classic stupidities, that we don't price the risks properly because the money's broken. So we just sort of willy-nilly do shit. We have, a lot of the dangers of AI actually come from utilitarian organizations that don't care about the means, they just care about the end, right? So like if we create an AI, then it'll make our bottom line better, or it'll give us whatever edge against the other nation state competitor or whatever. Like you look at these people like Sergey Brin, etc., who are running Google. Like they got extraordinarily wealthy via the proximity to the monetary spigot, and now they have the space and the time and the monetary resources to try and play fucking God. And we have no fucking idea what that entails. And then you have these other fucking problems in there, is that any AI that they're developing, they're sort of almost trying to imbue values like values from modern man into these AIs. So like I was speaking with Rob Malka, who he's a great Bitcoiner, great mind, and he's done a bunch of analysis on on the AI space, and he sees it as a huge threat because these people that are working on AI and working on sort of like the values that should be instilled in these creations, whatever the hell we're going to call them. When it comes to things like excellence, for example, like the nerds don't value that. They think that that's a right-wing extremist kind of viewpoint. So it's like, imagine having some sort of system that disincentivizes excellence in the entities or the constituents that it's managing. That's some fucking dangerous shit, man. Like, so we could really like fuck things up, because we are the current financial system is basically giving a blank check to these entities that have no economic consequence to building shit that nobody actually wants or needs, but they're just going to build it, and something bad could come out the other end, because there was no market force to disincentivize the creation of it. And that's that's like a Pandora's box. Like, and I don't know, like my hope is that Bitcoin sort of breaks these monopolies in time for, some Leviathan not to sort of come out of the fucking Pandora's box and really throw a spanner in the works.
Yeah, maybe Leviathan's not out yet, but I do think Pandora's box has been open. I think of like TikTok, and I've heard allegations that, the algorithm's going to show the kids in China very different things than they're going to show the kids in America. And it's all excellence in China. It seems like they're trying to show the kids, and debauchery here in the States. Who is Homo Bitcoinicus?
Yeah, so this is sort of my attempt to try and identify and categorize who the two classes of human are going to be down the track, right? It's like Homo idioticus or Homo hystericus or Homo stupidicus, whatever the fuck we're going to call him, is the idiot that ends up, with owning nothing and being happy and, using their CBDC cuck bucks, while Homo Bitcoinicus is the individual who has Bitcoin, has local networks, has some level of sovereignty, and is kind of like the master and leader of his own destiny, right? And maybe, just maybe, over multiple generations, maybe 100, 200, 300 years, you have a genetic difference forms in these two different kind of people, and you end up with two genetically different classes, one that is more moral in their behavior, one that is more slavish and stupid. And I don't know, some people might take offense at that, but I don't believe we're all the same. I honestly think there are fundamental differences in human beings, and I think they're going to get exaggerated with Bitcoin. And when you layer that difference, that exaggerated difference with Bitcoin, with the progeny, or the progeneration of offspring, is you might actually have more majestic people versus less majestic people. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's where we need to go again. Maybe that's that kind of system is what worked in the past. I mean, I don't know Nietzsche's work well enough, but I know, Rob Malkus sort of talks about how Nietzsche would say that things went wrong in the world. Like, we used to have kind of these natural elites who were the preordained, kings and effectively, demigods of the world. And you sort of had the lower class, the slaves. And it was when the kings and the slaves mixed their blood, the nobility and the slave blood, sort of, that you ended up with the average man. And ever since then, it's been downhill, right? So, maybe Bitcoin fixes that and takes us back into a world which, maybe none of us actually know what that's going to look like. And it may look more classicist and feudalistic than we've ever thought, but maybe that is actually better. And I don't know. We don't know. I don't know where it's going to go longer term, but I do think that we will get very different people between those who hold Bitcoin and those who don't.
Yeah, the great unseen. It's hard to imagine.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of the transition, I was reading The Remnant, and there was a particular quote that really stuck out to me. It was something along the lines of, the remnant are out there and they're rubbing up against, whatever friction in the world, and they're all trying to do their best.
Mm-hmm.
And what kind of like what you were saying is, like, that means to me that if there's 100 remnant and a million others, 99 or 98 of the remnant will make it, because it's better choices. So better choices, better outcomes, but it's not guaranteed. And maybe only 50% of the non-remnant make it. So their odds are worse in their own pool, but still greater numbers. But there's like the randomness, because like nature's not safe. The one or two who don't make it, even though they're making the right choices. And what is this transition period going to be like? So how long of a transition period do you think this is going to be? And like, what are different ways of looking at the transition period, like in terms of impact?
Yeah, damn, man. Such a hard question. The length is anybody's guess, right? And I think I remember speaking about this with Marty on one of his podcasts, and yeah, my what I kind of said was, I think if you think of it as a curve, the area under a curve is, you've got curve number one is very short and deep and sharp, and the depth and sharpness is related to the extremity of the clown world. So if it's like really ugly and really bad, and if it really goes down very badly and recover, like, it might recover much quicker, right? So we get a very sharp fall and a sharp reversal and rise. And that is that's sort of one option. The other one is that it's like a slow burn, and it's not that bad and it's not that painful, but it's like it lasts a long time, so maybe it goes 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 years, whatever. But sort of the severity is low, but the time span is long. So the area under the curve is probably the same. So my guess is that the area under the curve is going to be the same. We're going to have to pay a similar price either way. But which one it is, I don't know. So then my whole thesis then is to be prepared for both, is to prep for, the long one and prep for the short one, and be in a position where you can capitalize on either.
Which would you prefer?
Fuck. I don't know. I kind of lean towards, like, it depends almost what day you ask me. days that I'm feeling, more energetic and more willing to sort of go out and fight, I would prefer the quick one, because we just get the shit over and done with. But then there is sometimes, like where if I'm training or, like living a good life, getting sunshine, this and that, I'm like, you know what, fuck it. Let's just enjoy the clown world. It's not that bad, blah, blah, blah. So I don't know, kind of depends.
Yeah, I think I lean towards short, deep, get it over with. That might be my high time preference in that, just in terms of, I mean, it's my life.
We kind of want to see it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I
we
want to
wanna
see it. And I
Yeah.
want to get it there quickly for my kids and their kids. And
Mm-hmm.
and I like when the scoreboard says we're right. It's not a bad thing. But I mean, is Clown World going to get worse? And
Yeah,
if so, how?
Yeah. It's gonna get worse. I mean, I don't know fucking how at this point. Like, God knows what other stupidity is gonna come out of these idiots. Like,
what about debt jubilees and UBI?
Yeah, they'll come. They'll come. My guess is that they're sort of like, as unrest increases, what other options are they going to have, right? It's like the debt jubilee will probably. I mean, I don't know if that comes before or after UBI. Maybe some small level of UBI sort of comes in first, and then that sort of doesn't help anymore. So then it's a debt jubilee. That helps for a little bit, and then they increase the UBI. That sort of shuts people up for a little bit. But yeah, I think they're gonna have to throw everything in the kitchen sink at unrest, because things are getting pretty bad out there, man. Like, people can't afford food anymore. Like, even here in Eastern Europe, like, man, it's like almost the price of eating is almost what I used to pay in Australia 3 years ago, and the quality of living is like fucking hell, man. Like, there's no comparison. It fucking sucks here. And it's getting expensive. Like, I remember before leaving America, you want to have a decent steak, you just to buy it from Whole Foods, you're spending 25, $30 before you cook the damn thing. You want to go out and get a good steak, you're spending 60, $70. Who the fuck can afford that?
What I'm leaning into and keeping my eye on is just what Dave Collum called lifestyle creep. So prices seem to have been going up, compounding. I mean, more than 10% a year, in my opinion, especially on the things people want and enjoy.
Yeah.
And yet I don't see a lot here, especially in the States. I haven't seen a lot of lifestyle change. I haven't seen the reaction. I don't know if people are financing it on credit card debt, however they're doing it, but I don't see a change in temperament yet or lifestyle. Do you, when you're traveling in Europe, are you seeing people cut back?
Europe's done quite well, I must admit. A lot of people talk, about Europe sort of imploding, especially with all the energy stuff and everything like that. But at least the places I've been in Europe, like, Europeans, I think there's something there about the fact that they've probably like been through a series of world wars and like blowing up their lives and all this sort of shit so many times, that I think they actually have a far more local there's something more local about Europeans. Like, particularly, I was in the Alps recently in the north of Italy, and man, the prices there are still cheap as fuck. Like, you a pizza, a beautiful, big, large, fucking beautifully tasting pizza with local ingredients, $9. Like, it's still cheap. Like, it's, you can still eat well, and the quality of the food is shits all over like what you'll find in the US. Like, it's way, way, way better. And the cows are local, the cheese is local, the meat's local, like everything's local. So, there's places like that in Europe where they've done a really good job, and I think it's just a function of they've had to survive through multiple world wars, right? Whereas, like, America, for example, has a whole lot of supply chain, issues that when it does start to fall apart, it's going to be an issue. But even in Prague, I was in Prague about a month ago, and the food was beautiful. Like, there was an abundance of it. Yes, the prices had gone up, but it still wasn't that bad. Like, so anyway, coming back to your question, like, I've been traveling and I still haven't seen much lifestyle creep, but I have noticed that things have gone up. I know that people who are slightly more in poverty, they are starting to feel the lifestyle creep. But I mean, maybe it's also a function of the places that I was visiting maybe weren't weren't in the lower socioeconomic sort of sphere, and so maybe I'm not seeing it, and maybe I'm sort of looking in the wrong place.
Yeah, I keep looking. I think maybe I'm sure people are addressing it in ways maybe that's I can't see. Maybe they are using financing, or maybe they're getting a second job. Maybe they are cutting back in areas that are not as exposed, or I'm just not sure. The other thing I've noticed is just there's seems to be a labor shortage everywhere I go. And again, I don't see additional people not working. I just don't know where the push is coming from right now. Just things just seem to be submerged. My final question for you is, what comes after Bitcoin? Is it teleportation? Is it time travel? Where are we going, Aleks?
Shit. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be 1,000,001 discoveries between Bitcoin and teleportation. God knows what comes next. I mean, I would be pretty excited to see something like teleportation. That'd be kind of cool, but I don't think we're seeing it in our lifetimes anyway. So, whatever. Maybe bringing motherfuckers back to life, but that could also be a problem too, because who knows if we wanna mess with that kind of stuff. So, I don't know. I'd be pretty content with us getting Bitcoin sorted out, and then getting like some sort of really efficient global transport sorted out, and nuclear energy. I'd be super excited. Like between those ones, you get good energy, a bunch of other stuff sort of come downstream from that, and good transportation as well. Like being able to like fly, for example, from Europe to the States in an hour would be fucking incredibly like beneficial to humanity. So transport and energy, if we can make some leaps and bounds in there, I think that'd be very fucking cool, and that's potentially achievable in our lifetimes. So that's sort of what I'd hope beyond Bitcoin, at least in the short term. I'm not smart enough to think any too much further beyond that at this point.
Yeah, I'm gonna use my cheat code. I'll ask one more question, really maybe even a comment, but I did get to see you down in Austin. You spoke with Eric Kaysen at BitBlock Boom. It was a great presentation, but I'll give you a chance to respond. I'll give it in question form though, because Eric kind of sold you out by saying you would sell him out in the gulags. So, are Bitcoiners going to get thrown in jail? And if so, are you going to sell out Eric in the gulags for some bread?
Did he say that? I can't even remember now. Fuck.
Oh, he totally said that. He said, yeah, Bitcoiners, if we go to jail, we'll be in the gulags. And, at the end of the day, Svetsky's going to sell me out for some bread.
Motherfucker. Well, I better hold true to that promise then. I mean, shit. You want to end this on a dark note, don't you?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't fucking know how bad it gets, bro. Like,
yeah.
I think that this is tricky. It's like, we've kind of put our names out there, and we've made a brand out of ourselves, with Bitcoin. So it's like, how dumb can you get with respect to putting a target on your back? Like, I think a lot of us Bitcoiners are about as dumb as it gets in that sense. The thing is, someone's got to do the work, right, to sort of like help spread and all this sort of stuff. So, we're simultaneously like, what do you call it? Optimistic, because we, want the world to get better, but we also, pessimistic, because we know that there's a lot of risk that comes with this shit. And I don't know, do we get thrown in gulags? Maybe some of us do. Obviously, hopefully I don't. Hopefully you don't. Hopefully, the best of us don't. But I mean, there's one of us already sitting in a gulag, and that's
Ross.
Ross and stuff like that. So, I don't know. Hopefully, we'll be nimble and smart enough to avoid that.
All right, yeah. So I fucked that up. I didn't want to end up on such a dark note. What I will say then is, thinking about this piece, Fire Bitcoin Teleportation. I think Aleks wrote this, and he hopes it inspires, grander, broader thinking about what Bitcoin represents on a multi-millennia, maybe even a galactic timescale. It's not just about money, but the money. And he hopes it inspires, grander thinking about science fiction, incorporating discovery of energy money, and even a new class of physicists and future groups of Einsteins and Newtons. So I think the piece is tremendous, and where I want to turn our attention to next and last is just the Bitcoin Times. It's a tremendous piece of work. I particularly love all the editions. This one I'm holding, though, A New Hope, and I'm getting into the new one that just came out on Austrian economics. The Seyfedin piece is fire. The Bitstein piece is in there, right? I've seen, that one's fire. So maybe now's a chance to tell people about a little bit more about Bitcoin Times and the new edition and how they can get it.
Yes. So the whole point of what I want to do with Bitcoin Times is to bring together brilliant writers, brilliant thinkers once a year to produce what I would hope is considered, one of the, like, a collection of essays that you want to keep forever, in the form of a collectible, that is, uniquely numbered, that is printed, really well, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of what I want to do with it. And there's going to be 21 editions in total. There'll be 2,100 of each edition printed as a collectible, and they're uniquely numbered. I know you've got, what number do you have?
I have 129 out of 2,100.
129. So 129 of 2,100. And yeah, the idea is that, people buy, each edition as it comes out. It's, only available for Sats. And then one thing I'm doing that's unique is that I'm fixing the price in Sats on the day of release. So when it does get released, that's the price in Sats, and that's the price in Sats that'll be forever. So, if Bitcoin gets a little cheaper, then hey, you've got cheap Bitcoin Times. If it gets a little more expensive, then you've got more expensive Bitcoin Times. So, at least, dollar denominated. So, it's available now. Edition 3 and Edition 4 prints are available, and they're shipping now. Edition 5 goes to print, or it's actually gone to print, and it'll be available for Christmas. And I'm doing a pre-sale for that. So depending on when people listen to this, there'll be a pre-sale to save some Sats. I think you save 40,000 Sats. And yeah, I'd love people to go in and support it. Like when you finally get it in your hands and feel it, you'll see the difference. It's not just another fucking shitty magazine, or just another little book or whatever. It's really, really premium quality, numbered collectible item. And as I said, there's just never going to be any more printed. That's it, 2,100 of each.
Yeah, I love it. I recommend people get 2 copies of each, one to manhandle and read, and one to keep for longevity. It really is a collectible. It's made phenomenally well. And I'm going to ask you, what kind of work does it take to put this together? I mean, obviously, you seem to write one, I think, for every edition.
Yes.
Having this physical copy has been really huge for me. I do like physicality in the books I read, and so I've covered at least a piece from each edition, but this one I just can't keep holding and grabbing, and the artwork is phenomenal. So you're writing a piece, you're sourcing the authors, there's editing, there's artwork, there's graphic design, there's printing. I mean, what does it take to put something like this together?
Yeah, fucking a whole lot of headache. The edition 5 has taken 6 months of fucking around, and we're still not finished, basically. So yeah, it's tricky. That's why I'm doing one a year. And this is where I have respect for, organizations like Bitcoin Magazine, etc. Because they do a whole lot of stuff. These guys are producing 4 prints a year and thousands of articles every year. So that's a lot. But I think what I wanted to do with this was focus on quality over quantity. And I want sort of Bitcoin Times to be the place where all the best writers ever, they say, yeah, I've left my mark on the Bitcoin Times. And yeah, it takes a whole lot, as you said, there's a bunch of moving parts. You're sort of trying to herd cats and trying to pull it all together into something special is it's tough, takes a while, but here we are. We've got 5, and then hopefully next year we'll be doing the Austrian, sorry, not the Austrian, the energy edition. So I'm gonna start rounding up people for that. And yeah, man, it's a lot of fun, but it's also like it's tough work, but I fucking love doing it.
Yeah, man, it's awesome. I really love it. Thank you so much, Aleks, for coming on the show as always. This has been so dope. I'll leave it to you for any parting words and let people know they can find you on Twitter. And yeah, I think it's Timeless Bitcoin for this, the Bitcoin Times. But
Timeless Bitcoin, yeah. You? So yeah, Timeless Bitcoin on Twitter, and Svetski writes. They go bitcointimes.io. They'll find it. In fact, I set you up a code. So if you use the code Matrix, you'll get another 21,000 sats off your order. So if you want to use that, jump in there, check it out. I'm doing flat rate shipping. So if you order 1 or up to 6 copies, it's flat rate shipping. So that way, it saves you on that. And then, yeah, people can sort of find all of my stuff at svetsky.info. I'm on there, and that sort of links out to all the different things.
Yeah, and peep our prior episodes and check out On Communist Manifesto with Mark Moss. Thank you so much, Aleks. It's just so dope.
Thank you, bro.
Thank you so much for checking out this episode. Again, make sure that you're subscribed so that you don't miss out on any new content. I'd love to hear your feedback. Leave a comment or send me an email at cedricyoungelman@gmail.com. Let me know what you think and if you have guest suggestions. I want to thank my friend Aleks Svetski for taking the time to come on the Bitcoin Matrix podcast. I want to thank our sponsors, River Financial, Coinkite, and CrowdHealth for powering the show. Their support goes a really long way to helping me put the show out week after week. I'm also able to produce the show thanks to the support of my listeners and viewers. Huge shout out and thank you to those of you who are streaming and boosting the show for Sats on the Fountain app. I see you and I hear you. From my rip with Matt Odell, from the boost legend himself, Eric99 says, great rip, stay humble, stack sats, and he boosted 50,000 sats. The Wild Hustle wrote, appreciate the high signal. Mixmaster Mikey B wrote, always quality from the Bitcoin Matrix. It's one of the few podcasts that really prompts me to think officially, to think critically and introspectively about what it means to be a Bitcoiner. From my episode with Jeff Booth, hello, Cedric. Your show is one of my favorites. Just wanted to say thank you for what you do. It's really great and always super interesting. All the best, _HODL. From the Dave Collum rip, Gene Everett wrote, amazing guest and conversation. Boost, 33,000 sats. Thank you for the kind words, your feedback, and contributions. They mean a lot to me and help keep me going and motivated to produce more and more fresh and dope content for you guys. Bitstein, Joe Consorti, Lawrence Lepard, Susie BDDS, and Eric Weiss are up next. Stay humble, stack sats, and get laser focused out there. This is Cedric. Peace.